They praised my sister's life like a press release while I was just background static. That changed the night I spoke a single sentence. And the room went silent as if someone had cut the power. I thought being seen was a gift, but it was the price required for them to start hunting me. What they did not expect was that I was used to being disregarded, so I was used to preparing in silence. My name is Zara Campbell. I am 34 years old, and for the vast majority of my life, I have existed as the human equivalent of a screensaver. I am the thing you see when the main action has paused. A placeholder that is pleasant enough to look at but entirely devoid of content that anyone deems worth remembering. If families are ecosystems, mine is a theater where the spotlight is permanently welded to a single position, and I am the stagehand dressed in black, scurrying in the shadows to tape down the wires so the star does not trip. The star, of course, is Brielle. My sister is 2 years older than me, and her life has followed a trajectory so perfect it feels scripted by a marketing agency. In high school, she was not just popular, she was beloved. In college, she met a man named Todd who had a square jaw and a future in commercial real estate. They married in a ceremony that was featured in a regional bridal magazine, bought a colonial house in a subdivision where the lawns look like golf courses, and produced 2 photogenic children who seem to have been born knowing how to pose for Instagram. Brielle is loud. She is vibrant. She consumes all the oxygen in a room just by inhaling. When she talks, people lean in. When I talk, people check their watches or suddenly remember they need a refill on their Chardonnay. It was never more obvious than at our family gatherings. We have these mandatory dinners once a month, usually at my parents' house, a sprawling place in the suburbs that smells perpetually of potpourri and furniture polish. I would drive down from the city, park my sensible sedan behind Todd's massive luxury SUV, and prepare myself to disappear. At the last Thanksgiving dinner, the dynamic was so sharp it could have cut glass. We were all seated around the mahogany table, the air thick with the smell of roasted turkey and sage stuffing. My father, Mark, was at the head of the table, carving the bird with the seriousness of a surgeon. My mother, Dana, was fluttering around filling wine glasses, her face flushed with the stress of hosting. "So," my father said, pausing with the knife in midair. He looked directly at Brielle. "Todd tells me you guys are finally pulling the trigger on the kitchen remodel. Are you going with the quartz or the granite?" Brielle beamed, lighting up like a billboard. "Oh, Daddy, it is such a drama. We actually found this incredible Italian marble, but the contractor says it stains if you so much as look at it with a glass of red wine. But it is so beautiful. It has these gray veins that just look like storm clouds." "Go with the marble," my mother chimed in, sitting down finally. "Life is too short for ugly countertops. You deserve the best, honey." They spent 20 minutes discussing stone, 20 minutes analyzing the merits of backsplash patterns and the wait time for custom cabinetry. I ate my potatoes in silence, nodding at the appropriate intervals, offering a small smile when eyes swept over me, which was rare. When the conversation finally lulled, I saw an opening. I had recently led a team that stopped a massive data breach for a healthcare conglomerate, a victory that had saved millions of patient records and earned me a significant bonus and a commendation from the board of directors at Vantacrest Digital. It was a big deal. It was the kind of thing that usually made parents proud. "I actually had a busy month too," I said, keeping my voice level. "We had a major security incident at work, and I had to coordinate—" "Oh, wait, before I forget," my father interrupted, turning back to Brielle as if I had not spoken a single syllable. "Did you book the flights for Cabo? I was looking at the dates, and the prices are jumping." "I know," Brielle gasped, putting a hand to her chest. "I was on the phone with the travel agent for 3 hours yesterday. Can you believe they want $800 for Economy Plus?" And just like that, my data breach was gone. My career was dust. My voice was just a hum in the background, easily tuned out in favor of the more interesting broadcast of Brielle's vacation planning. I looked down at my plate, felt the familiar sting in the back of my throat, and swallowed it down with a sip of water. I did not try to speak again for the rest of the meal. This was my role. I was the listener. I was the audience. But more than that, I was the utility player. After dinner, the pattern continued. While Brielle and my mother looked at fabric swatches on the iPad, and my father and Todd discussed interest rates in the living room, the inevitable summons came. "Zara," my father called out, "the printer is doing that thing again. It says it is offline, but the green light is on." I stood up and walked into the study. I did not sigh. I did not roll my eyes. I just went to fix it. I sat at his cluttered desk, navigated through the drivers, reset the network connection, and printed his test page. It was just a connection error. "Dad," I said, walking back into the living room, "it is working now." "Great," he said, without looking away from Todd. "Thanks." 10 minutes later, it was Aunt Linda, who had come over for dessert. "Zara, honey, my Facebook is locked again. It keeps asking me for a code, but I do not know where they are sending it." I took her greasy phone, wiped the screen on my jeans, and spent 15 minutes resetting her password, setting up two-factor authentication, and explaining for the 50th time that she should not click on links from people she does not know. "You are a lifesaver," Linda said, patting my cheek vaguely before turning to my mother. "It is so handy that she understands all this tech stuff. What is it you do again? Zara, is it Geek Squad?" My mother laughed, a tinkling, dismissive sound. "Oh, she does something with computers. I do not really understand it. She works for some company in the city. Support, I think. She is the one you call when your screen freezes." I stood there, a director of operations for one of the premier cybersecurity firms on the West Coast. A woman who managed a budget of $12 million a year and led a team of 40 elite engineers, and I said nothing. "Something like that," I said. Why didn't I correct them? Why didn't I pull out my phone and show them my title on LinkedIn? Or show them the article in the industry trade journal that had named me a rising star in digital defense? Because I had learned a long time ago that they did not want to know, to them. My complexity was inconvenient. It did not fit the narrative. Brielle was the success. I was the help. If I started talking about encryption protocols or threat vectors, their eyes would glaze over. If I mentioned my salary, they would feel uncomfortable, or worse, they would think I was lying. It was easier to let them believe I was scraping by. It was easier to let them think I lived in a cramped rental and fixed printers for a living. I left home at 18 and never looked back. Moving to Seattle to attend university on a scholarship I had applied for without their help. I built my life in the rain-slicked streets of the Pacific Northwest, far away from the stifling expectations of my childhood home. My life in Seattle is a secret garden they know nothing about. They think I live in a studio apartment in a transitional neighborhood. They do not know about the condo I bought 2 years ago in a high-rise downtown. They do not know about the floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over Elliott Bay, or the way the ferries look like glowing beetles moving across the dark water at night. They do not know that my furniture is Italian leather, not IKEA. They do not know that I have a savings account that could pay off my parents' mortgage tomorrow if I chose to write the check. I work hard. My days at Vantacrest are intense. I manage crises that could bankrupt Fortune 500 companies. I make decisions that require nerves of steel. I am respected. When I walk into a conference room in Seattle, people stop talking. They listen to my assessments. They trust my judgment. I have mentors who tell me I am brilliant, colleagues who invite me to drinks, and a reputation for being the person who stays calm when the building is burning down. But I keep that world hermetically sealed from my family. When I visit them, I dress down. I wear jeans and plain sweaters. I drive a 5-year-old car that I keep specifically for these trips and for running errands where I do not want to worry about door dings. I nod when they give me advice about saving for the future. I listen when Brielle explains to me how to use a coupon app she found, as if I am on the verge of poverty. "You really should try it, Zara," she told me once, showing me her phone screen. "I saved $4 on detergent yesterday. Every little bit helps when you are on a single income, right?" Right, I said. Thanks, Brielle. It is a strange form of masochism. Perhaps, or maybe it is just a survival mechanism. If I showed them who I really was, I would have to deal with their jealousy, or their sudden interest in my wallet, or their disbelief. I prefer the invisibility. I prefer being the background noise. And yet, there is a part of me, a small, pathetic, childlike part of me, that still hurts. It is a dull ache, like a bruise that never quite fades. I look at my father looking at Brielle, his eyes shining with pride as she recounts a story about her daughter's ballet recital. And I wonder what I would have to do to get that look. Would I have to cure a disease? Would I have to fly to the moon? Probably not. Even if I flew to the moon, my father would likely interrupt my story about the lunar landing to ask Brielle if she had decided on the color for the guest bathroom. I remember one specific evening last winter. It was my birthday, but due to a scheduling conflict with Brielle's yoga retreat, we were celebrating it a week late, combined with a congratulations dinner for Todd, who had closed a big deal. My mother had baked a cake. It was chocolate, my favorite, which felt like a small victory, but when she brought it out, the writing and icing said, "Congrats, Todd, happy B-Day Z." Todd got the full word. I got the initial. We ran out of room on the icing. My mother laughed, setting it down. But it tastes the same. Make a wish, Zara. I looked at the candles flickering in the dim light of the dining room. I looked at Brielle, checking her makeup in the reflection of the window. I looked at Todd, loosening his tie, looking satisfied with his commission check. I looked at my parents, smiling that vacant, obligatory smile they reserved for me. I blew out the candles and I did not wish for happiness. I did not wish for love. I wished for silence. I wished for a moment where the static would stop and they would actually hear the frequency I was broadcasting on. "So, Todd," my father said, the moment the smoke cleared, "tell us about this commission structure. Is it tiered?" I cut the cake. I served everyone a slice. I took the smallest piece for myself and ate it in silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the clatter of forks, and the endless drone of my sister's perfect life. I went back to Seattle the next morning. I drove 3 hours in the pouring rain, listening to a podcast about cyber warfare, feeling the tension drain out of my shoulders with every mile I put between myself and my childhood home. When I unlocked the door to my condo, the silence that greeted me was different. It was not the silence of being ignored. It was the silence of peace. It was the silence of control. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights reflecting off the black water. I poured myself a glass of expensive scotch, a bottle that cost more than the dishwasher Brielle had been bragging about, and stood there in the dark. "I am fine," I whispered to the empty room. "I am successful. I am whole." But as I stood there, watching the city breathe, I knew I was lying. Success in a vacuum is cold comfort. We are social creatures. We crave the validation of our tribe. No matter how high I climbed at Vanta Crest, no matter how many zeros were in my bank account, I was still the girl who fixed the printer. I was still the girl who got the abbreviation on the birthday cake. I checked my phone. One missed text from my mother. "Did you make it back okay? Also, Brielle thinks she left her scarf in your car. Can you check?" Not, "I love you." Not, "It was great to see you." Just a logistics check for the golden child. I typed back. "Made it. No scarf." I put the phone down on the marble island of my kitchen. Real Italian marble, with gray veins like storm clouds. Exactly the kind Brielle wanted but could not afford. And finished my drink. They thought I was static. They thought I was the white noise you ignore to sleep better at night. They had no idea that static, when amplified, can shatter glass. They had no idea that the person who knows how to fix the system also knows exactly how to dismantle it. I did not know it then, but the status quo was about to break. The invisible daughter was about to become very, very visible, and it would all start with a simple question at a birthday party for an aunt who was the only person who had ever really looked me in the eye. I washed my glass, dried it, and placed it back in the cabinet. I was ready for bed. I was ready for work the next day. I was ready for anything, except, perhaps, for the way everything was about to change. The humidity in Savannah, Georgia, does not just sit on your skin, it owns you. It is a heavy, wet blanket that smells of river mud and blooming jasmine, clinging to everything it touches. We were gathered at one of those historic hotels in the historic district, a place with checkerboard marble floors, velvet drapes thick enough to suffocate a man, and a reputation for being haunted. It was the perfect setting for a family gathering that felt less like a celebration and more like a stage play where everyone had memorized their lines, except for me. We were there for Aunt Estelle. She was turning 75. Estelle was the matriarch in waiting, a woman who had buried 2 husbands and invested the insurance money with the ruthlessness of a Wall Street shark. She was the only person in my family who looked at me and saw something other than empty space. When I was a child, while my parents were busy filming Brielle's tap dance recitals, Estelle would hand me books, biographies of queens, manuals on strategy, novels about women who walked into the ocean and came back as storms. She never hugged me, but she never ignored me. The private dining room was lit by a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than my first car. The table was set for 20 people, laden with silver that had been polished to a mirrored gleam. At the center of it all sat Brielle, glowing in a peach-colored silk dress that showed off her tan. She was holding court, recounting the saga of her recent kitchen renovation as if she were describing a humanitarian mission to a war zone. And then the contractor told me the brass fittings were on back order for 6 weeks, Brielle said, her voice pitching up in that way that demanded sympathy. I nearly cried right there in the showroom. Can you imagine living without a kitchen sink for 6 weeks with 2 children? A chorus of sympathetic murmurs rippled around the table. My mother, Dana, shook her head as if this were a genuine tragedy. You are a saint, honey. I do not know how you manage it all. Supermom. Truly. It is hard, Brielle sighed, taking a sip of her Chardonnay. But we do it for the family value. Todd says the equity bump will be massive. My father, Mark, nodded sagely. Smart man. Todd, real estate is the only game in town right now. I sat at the far end of the table, near the swinging door to the kitchen. It was the seat usually reserved for the person expected to get up and ask the waiter for more bread or iced tea. I was wearing a black sheath dress, simple, structured, and made of Italian wool, though I knew nobody here would recognize the cut. I cut my filet mignon into precise, bite-sized squares and focused on the rhythm of chewing. The conversation drifted, as it always did, to a comparative analysis of successes. Cousin Mike had just bought a boat. Uncle Jerry was retiring to Florida. And Brielle, of course, was Brielle. Then, the air in the room shifted. Aunt Estelle, who had been sitting quietly at the head of the table observing the circus with hooded eyes, tapped her spoon against her water glass. The sound was sharp, a single, clear note that cut through the humidity and the chatter. So, Estelle said. Her voice was raspy, damaged by 50 years of smoking, but it carried the weight of a gavel. She did not look at Brielle. She did not look at my parents. She looked straight down the length of the table, past the centerpiece of white roses, directly at me. We have heard enough about sinks and boats, Estelle said. I want to know about Zara. The table went quiet, but it was a confused quiet. It was the silence of a radio station momentarily losing its signal. Heads turned toward me, not with interest, but with a vague sort of bewilderment, as if they were surprised to find me sitting there. Zara? My mother laughed nervously, her hand fluttering to her pearl necklace. Oh, Estelle, you know Zara. She is just around. I did not ask if she was around. Dana, Estelle snapped. I asked about her life. We have not seen you in a year. Child, where are you living now? Still in that rainy city? Yes, I said. Still in Seattle. And what are you doing with yourself? Estelle pressed. She leaned forward, her diamonds catching the chandelier light. Your mother tells people you are doing technical support, fixing computers. Is that right? I saw my mother stiffen. She shot a look at the guests, a silent plea for them to overlook her daughter's mediocrity. She is in IT, Estelle, helping people with their passwords and things. It pays the bills. She is a sweet girl, Aunt Linda added helpfully, from 3 seats down. She fixed my Facebook last Thanksgiving, very patient. My father cleared his throat, clearly anxious to steer the conversation back to safer, more impressive waters. Actually, Brielle was just telling us about the private school they are looking at for the kids. The tuition is steep, but... Quiet. Mark, Estelle said. She did not shout. She did not have to. She just dropped the command like a stone. I am talking to my niece. Estelle's eyes locked onto mine. There was a challenge in them. She knew, somehow. She knew that the story being told about me was a lie, and she was handing me the microphone. She was giving me a choice: stay in the shadows where it was safe, or step into the light and burn them. I placed my knife and fork down on the edge of my plate. I took a sip of water. I blotted my lips with the linen napkin. I let the silence stretch for 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. I let them squirm. I am not in technical support, Mother, I said. My voice was low. But in the dead silence of the room, it carried to the corners. Well, whatever it is, my mother said, her smile tight and brittle. Computers are computers, right? I work for Vantacrest Digital, I continued, ignoring her. It is a global cybersecurity firm. We handle threat mitigation for sovereign states and Fortune 100 corporations. My father blinked. Vantacrest? I think I saw that name on the news. Something about the stock market? We secure the stock market, I corrected him gently. I am the Director of Operations for the Pacific Northwest Division. I oversee a team of 42 engineers and data architects. I manage an annual operating budget of $14 million. The silence that followed was not the confused silence of before. This was a different beast entirely. It was a vacuum. It was the sound of oxygen being sucked out of the room. My mother's smile froze, stuck halfway between condescension and shock. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. And as for where I live, I said, turning back to Estelle, keeping my face perfectly smooth, perfectly pleasant. I bought a place 2 years ago. It is a condo in the Spire building, overlooking Elliott Bay, 3 bedrooms, 2,000 square feet. It has a nice view of the ferries coming in at night. I picked up my wine glass and took a casual sip, from the corner of my eye. I saw Brielle. She had been in the middle of taking a drink, and the wine went down the wrong pipe. She hacked, a loud, ugly sound that shattered the sophistication of the moment. She slammed her glass down, red wine sloshing over the rim and staining the pristine white tablecloth like a fresh wound. You... what? Brielle wheezed, her eyes watering. You bought a condo? In the Spire? Todd looked at listings there. Those units start at... She trailed off, doing the math in her head, the numbers clashing violently with her perception of her little sister. Interest rates were favorable at the time, I said simply. My father was looking at me as if I had just grown a second head. He was leaning back in his chair, his brow furrowed, processing the information. Director? He repeated. Since when? You never said anything about being a director. I have been a director for 18 months. Dad, I said. And I did mention it. I mentioned it when I visited for Christmas. I mentioned it when I called for Mom's birthday. You were watching the football game. I must have missed that, he stammered. You usually do, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a statement of fact, delivered with the same neutrality as a weather report. My mother was the first to try to recover. She was a social creature, evolved to smooth over rough edges, and she could sense the hierarchy of the room tilting dangerously on its axis. She let out a high, breathless laugh. Well, isn't that wonderful? She chirped, though her eyes were darting around the table, gauging the reaction of the relatives. Our Zara, a director. I always told everyone she was smart with those machines. Didn't I tell you? Mark? Yes, my father lied. Yes, of course. We are very proud. But the warmth wasn't there. I looked around the table, and for the first time in my life, I did not see dismissal. I saw something colder. Uncle Jerry, the one retiring to Florida, was looking at me with narrowed eyes, recalculating his estimation of my utility. Aunt Linda looked at my diamond stud earrings, real ones, 2 carats each, which she had previously assumed were cubic zirconia, with a sudden, hungry sharpness. And Brielle, my sister, had wiped her mouth. The coughing had stopped. She was staring at me across the centerpiece. And the look on her face was not pride, it was not happiness. It was the look of a predator realizing that the prey has teeth. It was a mixture of fear and calculation. She was looking at my dress, really looking at it this time, recognizing the fabric, the fit. She was realizing that while she was bragging about granite countertops, I could likely buy her entire kitchen with my quarterly bonus. So, Brielle said, her voice tight, you have just been sitting on all this? While we were talking about everything else? You just didn't think it was worth mentioning that you are rich? I am not rich, I said. I am successful. There is a difference, and I didn't think it was relevant to the conversation about sinks. Ha! Aunt Estelle slammed her hand on the table, a grin splitting her wrinkled face. She has got you there, Brielle. She has got you there. Estelle raised her glass. To Zara, the dark horse. The family raised their glasses. Mumbling the toast, my mother drank deeply. My father looked at his steak as if it had betrayed him. Brielle did not drink. She just watched me. The dinner continued, but the dynamic was broken. The comfortable script where Brielle was the sun and I was the orbiting debris had been torched. The questions started coming, but they were not the questions you ask a family member you love. They were the questions you ask a stranger you are trying to vet for a loan. So, stock options? Uncle Jerry asked casually, leaning in. Do you get those? How is the market in Seattle? My father asked, suddenly interested in my geography. I heard it is a bubble. Do you have a guest room? Aunt Linda asked. I have always wanted to see the Space Needle. I answered them all politely. I gave them the data they wanted. I watched them feast on the information, digesting the fact that the family fix-it girl was actually the highest earner at the table. But as I looked at their faces, my mother's calculating smile, my father's sudden respect, Brielle's simmering jealousy, I felt a cold chill settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the hotel's air conditioning. I had spent my entire life waiting to be seen. I had spent decades wishing they would look at me and recognize my worth. I had thought that if I could just show them, if I could just prove that I was somebody, they would finally love me the way they loved Brielle. I was wrong. They saw me now. Oh, they saw me clearly. They saw the title. They saw the condo. They saw the potential for financial assistance. They saw a resource to be mined. I looked at Brielle, and she offered me a small, tight smile. It was the smile of someone who is already planning how to pivot, how to use this new variable to her advantage. I realized then, with a clarity that was both liberating and devastating, that the invisibility had been a form of protection, as long as I was nothing. They demanded nothing. As long as I was the background noise, I was safe from their greed. Now, the noise had stopped, the spotlight was on me, and in the harsh glare of their attention, I saw the truth. Being seen is a powerful thing. It validates your existence. It confirms your reality. But as I watched my mother signal the waiter to bring the best bottle of champagne, on my daughter's tab, she joked. Though she wasn't joking, I understood the warning that had been whispering in the back of my mind. Being seen is not always being loved. Sometimes, it is just being targeted. If silence was the soundtrack of my life before Aunt Estelle's birthday dinner, the weeks that followed were a heavy metal concert of notifications. My phone, once a device used primarily for work emails and weather checks, became a vibrating, blinking beacon of sudden popularity. It started the very next morning. I woke up to 3 missed calls and 5 text messages. Aunt Linda wanted to know if I was free for coffee before I flew back to Seattle because she just missed my face. Uncle Jerry sent a link to an article about cybersecurity trends with a caption that read, "Thought of you, kiddo." Cousin Mike, who had not spoken to me since he borrowed $20 from me in high school and never paid it back, sent a friend request on every social media platform known to man. It was fascinating. It was also terrifying. The most jarring shift, however, came from my mother. For 34 years, Dana Campbell had introduced me to her friends with a vague wave of her hand and a mumble about computers. Suddenly, she had developed a photographic memory for my resume. I overheard her on the phone a few days after the party. I was in the kitchen, making myself tea, and she was on the patio, her voice pitched loud enough to ensure the neighbors could hear. "Oh yes, Zara is still in town," she was saying. "She is a director of operations now, in the digital security sector. Yes, she manages a massive budget, very high-level stuff. We always knew she had a mind for business. It just took the right company to see it." I stood there, holding my mug, feeling a strange mixture of warmth and nausea. It was a lie, of course. They had not always known. They had actively ignored. But hearing my mother brag about me, even if it was performative, felt like a drug. It was a sugary, addictive rush. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that the title had simply unlocked a door that had been stuck, and now that it was open, the love could flow freely. Then came Brielle. My sister texted me 2 days before I was scheduled to leave. "Hey Z, are you free for brunch tomorrow? Just us girls. I feel like we haven't really talked in ages." Just us girls. The phrase was a relic from our childhood, a promise of intimacy that usually resulted in Brielle talking about herself for 2 hours while I braided her hair. But I agreed. Of course I agreed. We met at a bistro downtown, a place with exposed brick walls and avocado toast that cost $22. Brielle arrived 10 minutes late, looking flushed and chaotic in a perfectly curated way. She hugged me, a real hug, pressing her cheek against mine. She smelled of expensive vanilla perfume. "I am so glad you came," she said, sliding into the booth. "I feel like I have been drowning lately. Zara, just drowning." "Is everything okay?" I asked, signaling the waiter. "Oh, you know," she sighed, waving a manicured hand. "Life, the kids are great, but they are expensive. We just got the bill for Leo's private school tuition for next year. And honestly, I wanted to vomit. And the kitchen renovation, God, do not get me started. The contractor found mold behind the drywall. Mold! That is another $4,000 we did not budget for." She looked at me with wide, shimmering eyes. "But I should not complain to you. You are doing so well. It must be nice not to have all these domestic weights dragging you down." There it was. The pivot. It was subtle, smooth as silk. She wasn't asking for money directly. She was just painting a picture of disparity. She was the struggling mother. I was the unencumbered career woman. "I have expenses too, Brielle," I said gently. "Oh, I know, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her palm was warm. "But it is different, isn't it? I mean, you probably do not even look at price tags anymore, right? With your position?" She said it with a laugh, as if it were a shared joke, but her eyes were not laughing. They were scanning my face, waiting for confirmation. "I am comfortable," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I have worked hard to be comfortable." "And you deserve it," she exclaimed. "You really do. I told Todd last night." I said, "Zara has always been the smart one. We are just so proud of you." Proud, that word again. It hung in the air, glittering and dangerous. When the check came, Brielle made a show of digging through her oversized tote bag, frowning as she searched for her wallet. "Oh, shoot," she muttered. "I think I left my card in my other purse. The diaper bag switch is killing me." "I got it," I said. I placed my card on the tray before she could finish her sentence. Are you sure? She asked, looking relieved, but not surprised. Thank you. Z. You are the best. Next time is on me. I swear. We both knew there would not be a next time, but as we walked out into the sunlight, and she linked her arm through mine, I pushed the cynicism down. I told myself that this was what sisters did. They bought each other lunch. They supported each other. The floodgates opened slowly at first, a week after I returned to Seattle. My father called. Mark Campbell did not call me unless someone had died or a piece of technology had malfunctioned. Hey, kid, he said. His voice sounded strained. Listen, I hate to even bring this up, but I am in a bit of a bind. What is wrong, Dad? I sat up straighter in my office chair, minimizing the spreadsheet I was working on. It is the knee surgery, he said. The insurance company is pushing back on the anesthesia coverage. They are saying it is elective because I chose the specific surgeon. It is ridiculous, but the hospital wants the copay up front before they will schedule the procedure for next month. How much is it? I asked. It is $3,500, he said. A pause, a heavy, pregnant silence. I can move some money around, maybe pull from the retirement account. But the penalties are steep. I didn't know if maybe you could float it? Just for a few months? Until the end-of-year bonus comes in? My father had never asked me for a dime in his life. He was a proud man. Hearing him ask felt like a shifting of tectonic plates. It validated me in a way I hadn't expected. I wasn't just the daughter. I was the savior. Don't worry about it, Dad, I said. I will wire it today. Consider it a gift. You need that knee fixed. You are a good girl. Zara, he said, his voice thick with emotion. A really good girl. I appreciate this. I hung up feeling 10 feet tall. I had solved a problem. I had protected my father. I was useful. Then came the kitchen. My mother started sending me photos of the renovation progress. At first, it seemed like she just wanted to share. Look at this dust, she would text, living in a construction zone. Then the tone shifted. She sent a picture of a slab of quartz, white with beautiful gray veining. This is the one Brielle wanted. It is perfect. But the price doubled since last month. Inflation is criminal. We are going to have to go with the laminate. It breaks my heart. She was so excited about baking Christmas cookies on this counter. I stared at the photo. I looked at my own bank account. I had just closed a consulting deal that paid out more than most people made in a year. The money was sitting there, abstract numbers on a screen. How much is the difference? I typed back, $2,000. She replied instantly. Get the quartz. I texted, I will send the difference. Tell Brielle it is an early Christmas present. Oh, Zara. The reply came with heart emojis and praying hands. You are an angel. She is going to scream. We are so lucky to have you. And so it went. I was added to the family group chat, titled, The Campbell Inner Circle. It felt like an initiation rite. Suddenly, I was in the loop. I saw the photos of my niece's dance recital. I saw the jokes about Uncle Jerry's toupee. I was tagged in conversations. Zara, what do you think of this color for the living room? Zara, did you see that news story about the hackers? But slowly, the tags began to change flavor. Zara Leo needs a new laptop for school. Do you have any discounts with your company? Zara. Mom's car is making that noise again. Do you think we should just upgrade her? It is not safe. I paid for the laptop. I contributed to the down payment for the car. I paid for a family dinner that they ordered while I was 2,000 miles away in Seattle. Just because I wanted to treat them, I convinced myself this was normal. This is what families do. I thought, the successful ones help the others. It is the circle of life. I was not being used. I was being included. For the first time, I had leverage. I had value. When I spoke in the group chat, they replied. When I made a joke, they reacted with haha bubbles. I felt connected. I felt seen. But I was blind to the subtle erosion of gratitude. It happened about 2 months in. Brielle sent a text to the group. Guys, the hot water heater just died. Freezing cold showers this morning. Total nightmare. The plumber wants $1,800 to replace it today. She didn't ask me. She didn't tag me. She just put it out there, floating in the digital space like a hook in the water. My father replied, "That is terrible." "Honey," my mother replied, "Oh no, poor babies." Then, silence. They were waiting. I watched the screen. 1 minute passed. 5 minutes. They were all online. I could see the little bubbles indicating they were active, but nobody said anything else. They were waiting for the ding of my notification. They were waiting for me to type the magic words. "I will take care of it." I hesitated. I was in a meeting. I was busy. And a small, quiet voice in my head whispered, "Why doesn't Todd pay for it? Todd makes good money." But the silence in the chat felt heavy, accusing. If I didn't step in, would they go back to ignoring me? Would the inner circle close its ranks again? I typed, "Send me the invoice. I will cover it." The reactions came instantly. A thumbs up from Mark, a heart from Dana. But from Brielle? Thanks. Just that. No exclamation point. No, "You are an angel." No, "I don't know what we would do without you." Just thanks. It was the thanks you give a waiter when he refills your water. It was the thanks you give a vending machine when it dispenses your soda. It was a transaction. It was an expectation. I put my phone down on my desk. The cold glass surface feeling slick against my palm. A shiver went down my spine, a primitive warning signal that I had ignored for too long. The blossoming of affection had been beautiful. Yes, but flowers only bloom when you water them. And I was beginning to realize that the only water they accepted was green, and it flowed directly from my bank account. I looked at the group chat again. Brielle was already typing about something else, complaining about the weather. The crisis was over. The ATM had dispensed the cash. The background noise had been paid to stay pleasant. I went back to work, but the numbers on my screen blurred. I had bought my way in, thinking I was buying love, but I was starting to suspect I had only bought a subscription service, and the price was about to go up. It was a Tuesday evening in Seattle, the kind where the rain does not fall so much as it hangs in the air, a persistent, chilling mist that blurs the lights of the skyscrapers. I was sitting in my living room, a glass of Pinot Noir in one hand and a tablet in the other, scrolling through a digital architectural digest. I was feeling peaceful. I was feeling, for the first time in my life, integrated. Earlier that day, my mother had sent me a text message with 3 heart emojis, thanking me for the gift card I had sent for her spa day. Brielle had tagged me in a meme about sisters being partners in crime. I had smiled at it. I had double-tapped the screen. I was building a bridge, dollar by dollar, gesture by gesture, and I believed the foundation was holding. Then my phone rang. The screen lit up with a name that rarely appeared, Aunt Estelle. I felt a sudden spike of adrenaline. Estelle did not call for casual chats. She did not call to discuss the weather or swap recipes. In our family, a call from Estelle usually meant someone was in the hospital or someone had been written out of a will. I answered on the second ring. "Aunt Estelle, is everything okay?" "I am fine, Zara." Her voice came through the line. It sounded different than usual. It was not the sharp, commanding bark I was used to. It sounded heavy. It sounded tired. "Are you alone?" "Yes," I said, muting the television. "I am home. What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong with me," she said. There was a pause, filled only by the static of the line and the drumming of rain against my window. "But I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me without interrupting. And I need you to promise me you will not do anything stupid immediately." My stomach turned over. A cold, slow rotation. "You are scaring me, Estelle." "Good," she said. "You should be scared. You should be awake." She took a breath, the sound of her inhaling smoke audible even over the connection. "I was at your parents' house yesterday, for that Memorial Day barbecue. You were not there, obviously. I offered to fly down," I said quickly. "But Mom said it was just a small gathering and I should save my miles." "Yes," Estelle said dryly. She did say that. I sat on the porch. Zara. My hip was bothering me, so I stayed in the wicker chair behind the trellis, the one near the kitchen window. They did not know I was there. They thought I had left with Linda. I gripped the phone tighter. Okay. They were in the kitchen, Estelle continued. Your mother, your father, and Brielle. They were cleaning up, and they were talking about you. I felt a flush of warmth. Oh? Don't, Estelle said sharply. Do not hope. Kill that hope right now. Girl, it will only make this hurt more. She let that command sink in before she went on. Your mother was laughing. She was holding that new mixer you bought her, the professional one. $600, wasn't it? $550, I whispered. She said, I cannot believe she actually bought the top model. I only sent her the link as a joke. And then Mark, your father, he chuckled. He said, the girl is desperate. Dana. You could ask her for a kidney right now and she would express ship it on ice. The air in my condo suddenly felt very thin. I stood up, walking toward the window, pressing my forehead against the cold glass. They are just joking. Estelle, that is just Dad's humor. Stop it, Estelle snapped. I am not finished. Brielle was there. Your sister, the one you just bought a new water heater for, the one who calls you her rock on Facebook. I closed my eyes. What did she say? She said, it is actually perfect timing. With the market the way it is, having Zara is like having a private emergency fund that does not charge interest. I felt like I had been punched in the solar plexus. I couldn't breathe. Emergency fund, not sister, not family, a financial instrument, a backup plan. But that is not the worst part, Estelle said, her voice dropping lower, becoming almost gentle in its brutality. Dana asked Brielle if she felt bad. She asked if she felt guilty about taking so much from you when you have been gone for so long. And Brielle? She laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Estelle paused, and I knew she was debating whether to deliver the final blow. But Estelle was a surgeon of the truth. She did not leave shrapnel in the wound. Brielle said, Why would I feel bad? Zara thinks she is important now because we are paying attention to her. She thinks she matters because we act like we care. It is honestly pathetic how easy she is. You just throw her a crumb of affection, and she bakes you a whole cake. It is the best deal in town. The silence that followed was absolute. I did not cry. That was the strange thing. I expected tears. I expected the sobbing, heaving grief of a child who has been rejected. But that did not happen. Instead, a profound, icy numbness spread through my chest. It was as if someone had reached into my internal circuit board and pulled the master breaker. The lights went out. The hum of emotions stopped. Zara? Estelle asked. Are you still there? I am here, I said. My voice sounded robotic. It sounded like the voice of the director of operations, not the daughter. I debated telling you, Estelle said. I really did. I know you wanted this family dream to work. I know you have been lonely, but I could not sit there and watch them eat your food while they spit on your name. I could not do it. Thank you, I said. The words felt like stones in my mouth. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know, I lied. Do not confront them, Estelle advised. Not yet. If you scream at them now, they will just gaslight you. They will say I am a senile old woman hearing things. They will say they were joking. They will spin it. Zara, that is what they do. They spin things until you are the one apologizing. I know, I said. I know they will. Watch them, Estelle said. Just watch them. Now that you know the script, watch them act. It changes everything. I have to go. Aunt Estelle, I said. I have work to do. Be smart. Zara, she whispered. You are the smart one. Don't forget that. She hung up. I lowered the phone and looked out at the city. The ferries were still moving across the black water, carrying people home to their families. The Space Needle was glowing against the clouds. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 10 minutes ago. Yet the entire world had been rewritten. Pathetic how easy she is. The words echoed in my skull. They bounced around the empty rooms of my expensive condo. I walked to my home office. I sat down at my desk, the massive mahogany desk that I had bought to celebrate my promotion. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room. I did not open my email. I did not open my project management software. I opened a blank spreadsheet. I named the file, "The Cost of Admission." I started typing. My fingers flew across the keyboard with the muscle memory of a data analyst. I pulled up my bank statements on a second monitor. I pulled up my credit card history. I pulled up Venmo and PayPal. Date: March 12th. Recipient: Mark Campbell. Description: knee surgery. Copay. Amount: $3,500. Date: April 4th. Recipient: Dana Campbell. Description: quartz countertop upgrade. Amount: $2,100. Date: April 15th. Recipient: Brielle Halstead. Description: Leo's laptop. Amount: $1,200. Date: May 2nd. Recipient: Toyota dealership. Description: down payment for Dana's RAV4. Amount: $5,000. Date: May 20th. Recipient: plumber via Brielle. Description: water heater replacement. Amount: $1,800. I kept going. The flights, the dinners, the small loans for things that just came up, the random gifts I had sent to solidify my position in the inner circle. I summed the column. The total sat there in bold black font at the bottom of the screen. $22,450. In 3 months, I stared at the number. It was not a fortune to me. I made that amount in a few weeks of consulting. But that was not the point. The point was what that number represented. It was the price tag of my dignity. It was the subscription fee I had been paying to be treated like a human being by the people who were supposed to love me for free. I sat back in my chair. The numbness was starting to recede, replaced by something sharper: clarity, cold, hard, crystalline clarity. I had been approaching this wrong. I had been approaching my family like a charity case, hoping that if I gave enough, they would eventually see my value. But they were not a charity. They were a business, and a corrupt one at that. They had identified a market inefficiency, my desire for love, and they were exploiting it with ruthless efficiency. I picked up my phone again. I scrolled through the text thread. "Love you. Z." Brielle had written after the water heater payment. I looked at it now. I didn't see affection. I saw a receipt. I closed the spreadsheet, but I did not close the laptop. I opened a new browser window and searched for a name. Elias Thorne. Elias was a corporate attorney who had done some contract work for Vanta Crest. He was expensive, he was vicious, and he specialized in asset protection and privacy law. I drafted an email. Subject: urgent consultation, asset protection and privacy. Dear Elias, I need to schedule a meeting with you as soon as possible. I need to review my estate planning, specifically regarding beneficiary designations. I also need to discuss options for locking down my personal data and creating a legal firewall around my assets. This is a personal matter, but it requires the same level of security we apply to the firm. I am available tomorrow morning. I hit send. Then, I began the digital purge. I logged into my social media accounts. I did not delete them. That would look suspicious. That would look like a reaction. Instead, I went into the privacy settings. I restricted who could see my past posts. I changed the settings so that any future posts would be visible to a restricted list only, a list that included everyone in my family. From now on, they would see only what I wanted them to see. If I went on a trip to Paris, they would see a generic photo of a coffee cup. If I got a promotion, they would see nothing. I was cutting off the intelligence feed. I went into my bank apps. I removed the saved transfer contacts for Brielle, Mark, and Dana. No more one-click payments. If they wanted money next time, they would have to ask, and I would have to manually type in every digit. Giving myself time to think, time to refuse, finally, I went to the group chat. The Campbell inner circle. It was buzzing. My mother had posted a photo of a new patio set she liked. Would be perfect for summer BBQs, she wrote. Only $800 on sale. She tagged me. Zara, what do you think? I looked at the cursor blinking in the text box. The old Zara, the desperate Zara, would have typed, "Looks great. Do you want me to order it for you?" The new Zara sat in the dark and watched the cursor blink. I did not reply. I did not leave the group. I did not throw a tantrum. I simply let the message sit there, unanswered. Let them wonder. Let them think I was asleep. Let them think I was busy. I was not busy. I was beginning to understand the game. Brielle had said I was easy. She had said I was pathetic. She had said I thought I mattered because they pretended to care. She was right. I had been easy. I had been pathetic. But the thing about systems is that they can be updated. Patches can be installed. Vulnerabilities can be closed. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I poured the rest of the wine down the sink. I didn't want it. I wanted water. I wanted to be clear-headed. I walked back to the window. The rain was stopping. The city lights were sharpening. I was not going to cut them off. Not yet. That would be too simple. That would be a reaction. And reactions are emotional. Strategies are logical. I would stay in the chat. I would stay in their lives. I would answer their calls. But the flow of capital was over. The emergency fund was closed for business. And I was going to wait. I was going to wait and see what happened when the ATM stopped dispensing cash. I was going to see how long the love lasted when the transaction failed. And then, when they showed their true faces, when they proved Estelle right beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would not just walk away. I would dismantle the stage they had built on my back. I turned off the lights in the condo, plunging the room into darkness. For the first time, the dark did not feel lonely. It felt like camouflage. I was ready. The experiment began on a gray Tuesday, 3 days after I had opened the spreadsheet and calculated the price of my family's affection. I did not block their numbers. I did not leave the group chat. I did not change my tone to one of anger or accusation. I simply changed one variable in the equation. I removed the financing. I continued to text. I continued to ask about their days. I continued to be the dutiful daughter and the supportive sister, but I stopped volunteering. I stopped anticipating needs. I stopped reaching for my wallet the moment a sentence ended in a sigh. The change in the atmosphere was subtle at first, like the pressure drop before a storm. They did not notice it immediately because they were so accustomed to the rhythm of the transaction. They threw the ball. I caught it and returned it with cash attached. When I started returning the ball without the cash, they just stared at it, confused, waiting for the rest of the delivery. Brielle was the first to test the new boundaries. Her messages shifted gears, the photos of my niece and nephew, Leo eating ice cream, Sophie in her ballet tutu, began to vanish. In their place came the financial status reports. It was a masterclass in passive solicitation. Just got the bill for Sophie's dental work. She texted on a Thursday afternoon. $2,000 for braces. I honestly don't know where we are going to find that kind of money this month. Todd is stressing out so bad he can't sleep. In the past of 2 weeks ago, I would have replied within 30 seconds. Don't let Todd stress. I can cover half. Consider it an early birthday gift for Sophie. This time, I waited 5 minutes. I took a sip of my coffee. I typed, "That sounds really stressful. Brielle, orthodontics are so expensive these days. Hopefully, the payment plan options are reasonable." I watched the chat bubble appear, then disappear, then appear again, then stop. She did not reply for 4 hours. When she did, it was short. "Yeah, we will figure it out." 2 days later, she tried a different angle. This time, it was the car. "My transmission is acting up again," she wrote, sending a video of her dashboard where the check engine light was glowing like an angry eye. "Mechanic says it is going to be $1,200 just to open it up. I might just have to stop driving. I don't know how I'll get the kids to school, but we just don't have it." The hook was baited. The line was in the water. I don't know how I'll get the kids to school. It was a direct appeal to my guilt as an aunt. I replied, "That is so frustrating. Have you checked if it is still under the manufacturer's warranty? Sometimes they cover powertrain issues up to 100,000 miles. The response time this time was even slower. It took her until the next morning to write back. Checked. It isn't. Just going to be a hard month, I guess. She was waiting. Even in the text, I could hear the pause, the expectant silence where my offer of a wire transfer should have been. When it did not come, the conversation died. There were no questions about my work, no questions about my life in Seattle. The text thread, which had been buzzing with sisterly bonding when I was paying for water heaters, went silent for 3 days. Then it was my mother's turn. Dinah operated with a different strategy. She didn't plead poverty. She pleaded improved standards of living that she felt entitled to, but could not quite reach. She sent a barrage of photos of the kitchen renovation, which was currently stalled. Look at this backsplash. Zara, she wrote, it is hand-painted ceramic. It matches the quartz you helped with perfectly. But can you believe they want $40 a square foot? It is criminal. Your father says we have to stick to the cheap subway tile, but it just looks so pedestrian. She sent a sad face emoji, then a picture of the pedestrian white tile next to the gorgeous hand-painted one, clearly designed to show the tragic downgrade. I just want it to be nice for when you come home, she added. I want everything to be perfect for the holidays. The manipulation was elegant. She was tying the expense to my comfort. My visit. If I didn't pay for the tile, I was essentially choosing an uglier environment for myself. I replied, the hand-painted one is beautiful, Mom, but the white tile is classic and timeless. It will have better resale value anyway. I think Dad is right on this one. I could almost feel the shockwave travel from Georgia to Washington. Agreeing with my father's frugality? That was not in the script. The script called for me to say, no, you deserve the best. Let me get it. Well, she replied, her tone icy even in text. I suppose if you like the plain look, that is fine. We just wanted it to be special. She did not text me again for the rest of the week. My father, Mark, was less subtle. He called me on a Sunday. Hey, kiddo, he said. The warmth in his voice was thinner now, stretched tight over frustration. How is the big city? It is good, Dad, I said. Work is busy, I bet, he said. Must be nice. That corporate life. You know, I ran into Bob Miller yesterday at the hardware store. You remember Bob? He just retired. Bought a place down in the Keys. Fishing every day. That sounds lovely for him, I said. Yeah, Mark sighed. A heavy theatrical exhale. Must be nice to have that kind of nest egg. I was looking at my numbers, and with the market dip, I am looking at another 5 years at the grindstone, unless, you know, a miracle happens. He laughed, but it was a dry, hollow sound. He was waiting for me to ask about the numbers. He was waiting for me to say, Dad, let me look at your portfolio. Maybe I can help bridge the gap. 5 years will fly by, I said cheerfully, and it keeps you active. They say working longer is good for cognitive health. There was a silence on the line so profound I thought the call had dropped. Right, he said finally. His voice was flat. Cognitive health, that is important. Look, Zara, I have to go. The game is starting. He hung up without saying goodbye. As the weeks went by, the silence grew louder, the daily check-ins stopped, the funny memes stopped, the good morning texts stopped. The notifications that had made my phone dance for 3 months dwindled down to nothing. I realized then that our entire reconnection had been fueled by a very specific currency. I had been paying a subscription fee for their attention. I was not a family member. I was a premium service they had subscribed to, and now that the payment method was declining, they were canceling the service. It was painful, in a dull, aching way. Part of me, the part that was still 5 years old and wanted my mother to pick me up, wanted to cave. I wanted to send a check for $5,000 just to see the blue bubbles appear again, just to see the heart emojis. It would be so easy. I had the money. I could buy the love back in an instant, but then I would hear Estelle's voice in my ear. It is pathetic how easy she is. And I would close my banking app and go back to work. November arrived, bringing with it the cold rain and the inevitable pressure of the holiday season. This was the end game. I knew it. They knew it. The end of year was when bonuses were paid, when generosity was expected, when the guilt was at its peak. The invitation came in the form of a group FaceTime call. This was unprecedented. They usually avoided video calls because it required them to actually look at me. I answered. My phone screen split into three. Brielle was in her living room, looking tired and artfully disheveled. My parents were on their couch, sitting close together, a united front. "Zara!" my mother cried out, her hands clasped together. "Oh, look at you. You look so professional." "Hi, everyone," I said. I kept my face neutral. "What is going on?" "We miss you," Brielle said. "We were just sitting here talking about Christmas plans, and we realized we simply cannot do it without you this year. We just can't." "It wouldn't be a family Christmas without our tech mogul," my father joked, trying to force a jovial tone that did not quite reach his eyes. "We want you to come home early," my mother said. "Come for the whole week leading up to Christmas. We can bake. We can decorate. Brielle needs help with the kids. And you know how much Sophie loves her Auntie Z? Please, Zara," Brielle added, leaning into the camera. "Sophie keeps asking when you are coming. She wants to show you her dance routine. And honestly, I could really use the moral support. It has been such a tough year financially, and just having family around, it helps." There it was, the pivot back to warmth. The hints hadn't worked. The silence hadn't worked. So now they were deploying the nuclear option. Belonging. They were dangling the one thing they knew I craved. A seat at the table. A role in the inner circle. But I saw the cracks in the performance. I saw my father glance at his watch. I saw the tightness in my mother's smile. I saw the way Brielle's eyes darted away from the camera, as if she were reading off a cue card. They didn't want me. They wanted the fix. They wanted the person who would walk in, see the half-finished kitchen, and write a check to finish it. They wanted the person who would see the pile of unpaid bills on the counter and quietly make them disappear. They wanted the end-of-year bonus that I walked around with. "I would love to come," I said. The relief on their faces was instantaneous and grotesque. It was the relief of a sales team that just closed a whale client. "Oh, wonderful," my mother clapped. "That is just wonderful. I will make up the guest room, the one with the good light." "We will pick you up from the airport," my father said. "No Uber this time. VIP treatment." "I will book the ticket tonight," I said. "We can't wait," Brielle said. "It is going to be the best Christmas ever. We have so much to catch up on." We said our goodbyes. The screen went black. I sat there in my office, listening to the hum of my computer server. I felt cold. I felt like I had just agreed to walk into a lion's den wearing a suit made of raw meat. I picked up my phone and sent a single text to Aunt Estelle. "I am going back for Christmas." Her reply came 3 minutes later. "I knew you would. Just remember one thing. Zara, when you walk through that door, you are not walking into a home. You are walking onto a stage. They have rehearsed. They have a script. They know exactly what buttons to push because they installed them." "I know." I typed back, "I am ready." "Are you?" Estelle asked. Knowing the script is one thing, not falling for the performance when the lights go up is another. They are going to love bomb you. Zara, they are going to make you feel like the most special person on earth for 48 hours, and then they are going to present the bill. "Let them," I replied. "I want to see the invoice." I booked a first-class ticket. I did not use miles. I paid cash. I wanted to arrive rested. I wanted to be sharp. A week later, I packed my suitcase. I did not pack the diffident, eager-to-please clothes I usually wore home. I packed my structural blazers. I packed my Italian leather boots. I packed the jewelry I had bought for myself. The pieces that screamed, "I do not need you." I landed in Savannah on a crisp December afternoon. My father was waiting at the baggage claim, just as he promised. He hugged me, and for a second, I smelled the familiar scent of his Old Spice and tobacco. and I felt a treacherous pang of longing. I wanted to melt into that hug. I wanted to believe it was real, but then he pulled back. And before he even asked how the flight was, he said, "You know, the transmission on the station wagon finally died on the way here. Had to borrow your mother's car. Barely made it." He looked at me, his eyebrows raised, waiting for the sympathy, waiting for the offer. "That is lucky you had a backup," I said, smiling brightly. "Shall we go?" His face fell. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the irritation underneath. He grabbed my suitcase handle a little too roughly. "Yeah, let's go." The drive to the house was filled with chatter, but it was forced. They talked about neighbors I didn't know. They talked about politics. They skirted around the edges of money like hikers avoiding a sinkhole. When we pulled into the driveway, the house was lit up like a beacon. Wreaths in every window, a massive inflatable Santa on the lawn. It looked magical. It looked like the home I had always wanted to be part of. I stepped out of the car and looked at the structure. It was the same house I'd grown up in, but it looked different to me now. It wasn't a sanctuary, it was a theater. My mother was standing in the doorway, wearing a festive apron, her arms wide open. Brielle was behind her, holding Sophie. They looked like a Norman Rockwell painting brought to life. "Welcome home," my mother cried out, her voice pitching high and sweet. I took a deep breath of the cold air. I adjusted the strap of my designer bag. I checked my internal firewall. It was active. "Hello, Mother?" I said. I walked up the path, my heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete. I wasn't the background noise anymore. I was the audience, the critic, and, soon enough, the demolition crew. I walked into the house, into the smell of cinnamon and roasted ham and desperation. The play had begun, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just reading my lines. I was rewriting the ending. The house smelled of cinnamon, clove, and a sickening amount of pine air freshener. It was the scent of aggressive festivity, designed to mask the rot underneath the floorboards. My mother had gone all out. There were candles burning on every surface, and a playlist of soft jazz Christmas covers was looping in the background. The performance began the moment I walked through the door, but it reached its crescendo during dinner. Dana hugged me 3 times before the appetizers were even served. These were not the quick, distracted squeezes of the past. These were long, performative embraces where she would hold me by the shoulders, look into my eyes with a misty gaze, and say things like, "It just feels right having you here." The house felt so empty without our Zara. Brielle was equally tactile. She sat next to me, constantly brushing my arm or patting my hand to emphasize her points. "I was telling Todd," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "that Zara is the only one who really gets me, you know? We have that sister connection. It is psychic." I took a sip of my wine. It was a cheap blend, decanted into crystal to look expensive. "Is that so?" I asked. "Totally," Brielle said, reaching for the bread basket. "Like, I was thinking about you the other day when I saw this beautiful coat at Nordstrom, and I just knew you would love it. We have the same taste." My father, Mark, carved the ham with a theatrical flourish. "To the family," he announced, raising his glass, "and to Zara, for making the trip. We know you are a big shot now. We appreciate you making time for the little people." He laughed. Everyone laughed. I smiled. A thin, razor-sharp expression that did not reach my eyes. "I wouldn't miss it, Dad," I said. Then came the gifts. We moved to the living room, where the tree was drowning in lights. I had brought gifts. Of course, I had debated coming empty-handed, but that would have been petty. I wanted to maintain the high ground. I wanted my generosity to be the backdrop against which their greed would be highlighted. I gave my father a cashmere sweater, soft as butter and costing $400. He held it up against his chest. "Wow," he said. "This feels real nice. Good quality." He didn't say thank you. He just nodded, as if acknowledging that the tribute was acceptable. I gave my mother a pair of pearl earrings. She gasped, put them on immediately, and ran to the mirror. "Oh, look at that luster. These must be the real deal. You are spoiling us." Zara. Then I handed Brielle a small box. Inside was a gift card for a luxury spa package. $500 worth of massages and facials. She opened it and squealed. "Oh my God, I need this so bad. My back has been killing me." She leaned over and hugged me again, her perfume clouding my senses. "You are the best sister. Seriously, the best." She slipped the card into her pocket without a second glance. It vanished into the void of her entitlement. There was no hesitation. No, "This is too much." They accepted these things as if they were dividends paid out on an investment they had made in my birth. We ate dessert, pumpkin pie with store-bought whipped cream, and then the energy in the room shifted. I felt it happen. It was a subtle tightening, a collective intake of breath. The pleasantries were over. The bill was due. "Why don't we take our coffee in the sitting room?" Dana suggested, her voice a little too bright. "It is more comfortable." This was the signal. The sitting room was where the serious talks happened. It was where I had been lectured about my grades in high school. It was where they had told me they couldn't help me with college tuition. We sat down. My parents took the love seat. Brielle took the armchair. I sat on the sofa, facing them. It felt less like a family gathering and more like a tribunal, where I was both the defendant and the bank. My father cleared his throat. He set his coffee cup down on the coaster. "So," he began, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, "it is really great to have everyone together. Really great." "It is," my mother echoed. "And, Mark continued, avoiding my eyes and looking instead at the space just above my head, "it has been a tough year for the family. The economy is rough. Inflation is killing us. And with Brielle's situation," he trailed off, leaving the door open for Brielle to walk through. She sighed, a tragic, heavy sound. "It is just a nightmare. Zara, Todd's commission structure changed. The kids' school fees went up 20%. And now with the house repairs, we are looking at a hole, a big hole." She looked at me, her eyes wide and wet, practicing the face she used to get out of speeding tickets. "We were talking, and we thought, since you are doing so incredibly well, maybe we could structure something, like a family loan, or an investment. We would pay you back, of course, eventually." "It is about $30,000, my father interjected quickly, "to clear the debts and fix the roof, just to get us back to zero. $30,000. They asked for it as casually as they would ask for the salt. The room went silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fake electric fire and the distant hum of the refrigerator. They were all looking at me. 3 pairs of eyes, hungry and expectant. They were waiting for the yes. They were waiting for the, "Let me get my checkbook." I placed my coffee cup down on the table. The porcelain made a sharp clink against the glass surface. "Do you remember Memorial Day?" I asked. The question hung in the air, incongruous and sharp. My mother blinked. "What?" "The Memorial Day barbecue," I said, my voice conversational, calm. "Last May. It was a beautiful day. I hear you had ribs." Brielle frowned, confusion clouding her face. "Yeah? We had a BBQ. What about it?" "I wasn't there," I said. "But Aunt Estelle was. Do you remember?" My father shifted in his seat. "Estelle? Yeah, she was around. She left early." "Actually," I said. "She didn't leave early. She was sitting on the porch, behind the trellis, the one near the kitchen window." I saw the color drain from my mother's face. It happened instantly, like a curtain being dropped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "She heard you," I said. I looked at each of them in turn. "She heard everything." "I don't know what you are talking about," Brielle said, but her voice cracked. She grabbed a throw pillow and hugged it to her chest, a defensive shield. "She heard you call me a backup fund," I said. The silence that followed was not the expectant silence of before. It was a vacuum. It was the sound of oxygen being sucked out of the room by the sudden presence of the truth. "She heard you call me a walking ATM," I continued. She heard you, Brielle, say that I was pathetic. She heard you say that I was easy, that you could throw me a crumb of affection and I would bake you a whole cake. My father stood up, his face flushing a dark, angry red. Now wait a minute, Zara. That is not… Estelle is an old woman. She hears things. She gets confused. She recorded it. I lied. I didn't have a recording. But they didn't know that. And their guilt was so thick, I could taste it. Mark sat back down heavily. He looked at Dana. Dana looked at the floor. It was a joke, my mother whispered. Her voice was trembling. Zara, honey, you know how we talk. We were just blowing off steam. We didn't mean it. You meant it, I said. You meant it because it is exactly how you have treated me for the last 6 months. You only call when you need something. You only text when a bill is due. The moment I stopped paying, you stopped caring. That is not true, Brielle cried out. I love you. You are my sister. I am your financier, I corrected her. Or I was. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my dress. I felt incredibly light. The weight of their approval, which I had been carrying for 34 years, had simply evaporated. I am done, I said. Done with what? My father asked, his voice low and dangerous. All of it, I said. I am not paying for the roof. I am not paying for the school fees. I am not paying for the car repairs. I am not investing in the family. The bank is closed, permanently. You can't do that, Brielle said. Her shock was morphing into panic. Zara, please, we need that money. We already put a deposit down on the contractors based on… Based on what? I asked. Based on the assumption that I would save you? That was a bad assumption. You are being incredibly selfish, Brielle spat. The tears were gone now, replaced by a snarl. You have all this money sitting there, doing nothing, and you won't help your own family? You want us to struggle? You want my kids to suffer? I want you to be adults, I said. And if that feels like suffering to you, then yes. After everything we did for you, my mother said, finding her voice, it was the martyr's voice now. We raised you. We fed you. We welcomed you home for Christmas. You welcomed my wallet, I said. And now that the wallet is staying closed, I think I will leave. I walked toward the hallway. If you walk out that door, my father shouted, standing up again, pointing a finger at me. Don't you expect a call from us. Do not expect to be part of this family. I stopped. I turned around and looked at them one last time. They looked small. They looked ugly in the harsh light of the living room. Dad, I said softly, I haven't been part of this family for 20 years. I was just the staff. I turned and walked to the front door. My mother was calling my name now, her voice rising in a panic, realizing that the golden goose was flying away. Zara, wait, let's talk about this. We can work something out. I grabbed my coat. I didn't bother with my suitcase. I didn't care about the clothes. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the night. The cold air hit my face like a slap, sharp and cleansing. It smelled of winter and dead leaves. Standing on the porch, leaning against the railing with a cigarette in her hand, was Aunt Estelle. She was bundled in a thick wool coat, her breath pluming in the air. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. She looked at my empty hands. She looked at the set of my jaw. Then, she nodded, a single, slow nod of respect. I walked past her, down the stairs, and toward the rental car I had parked on the street because the driveway was full of their vehicles. I got in, I locked the doors, I started the engine. As I drove away, watching the Christmas lights of my childhood home fade in the rearview mirror. I thought it was over. I thought the worst was behind me. I thought I had cut the cord and I was free. I was wrong. I had cut off their money. Yes, but I had underestimated how desperate people get when their lifestyle is threatened. I had underestimated what they felt they were owed. They didn't just want my money. That was too temporary. They wanted the source. They wanted the name that signed the checks. And as I drove toward the airport, unaware of the storm that was brewing. My sister was already picking up her phone, not to call me, but to call someone else. Someone who could give her access to things she had no right to touch. I had left the stage, but they were about to steal the identity of the lead actor. The silence that followed my departure from Georgia was heavy, but it was not empty. It was the kind of silence that hangs over a battlefield after the artillery has stopped, where the survivors are too deafened to hear the enemy reloading. I returned to Seattle and threw myself into my work at Vantacrest Digital. I arrived at the office at 7 in the morning and left at 9 at night. I buried myself in threat assessments, encryption protocols, and team performance reviews. I told myself that the chapter was closed. I had walked out. I had cut the funding. I had reclaimed my dignity. For 3 weeks, my phone was blissfully quiet. No texts asking for money. No guilt-tripping voicemails. I began to relax. I began to think that perhaps they had finally accepted the new reality, that the Bank of Zara was insolvent. I was naive. I should have known that desperate people do not just accept defeat. They pivot. And in the world of security, a pivot usually means finding a new vulnerability to exploit. It started on a Tuesday morning, typically the busiest time of my week. I was in the middle of reviewing a penetration test report for a major banking client when my desk phone rang. Not my cell, my internal office line. I picked it up, expecting a colleague or a vendor. "Zara Campbell," I said, my voice clipped and professional. "Ms. Campbell, good morning," a man's voice said. He sounded polished, corporate. "This is David Ross from the Meridian Group in Atlanta. I hope I'm not interrupting." I frowned. I knew the Meridian Group. They were a mid-sized venture capital firm in the Southeast. Not a client, but a potential one. "I have a minute. Mr. Ross, what can I do for you?" "Well, I just wanted to reach out personally and congratulate you," he said warmly. "We received the pitch deck for your new consultancy yesterday, Campbell Strategic Security. It is impressive stuff. Really impressive." I stopped typing. My hand hovered over the keyboard. A cold drop of sweat rolled down my spine, tracing the line of my vertebrae like a finger of ice. "I am sorry," I said, keeping my voice dangerously steady. "My new consultancy?" "Yes, Campbell Strategic," Ross continued, oblivious to the fact that he was dismantling my life. "The focus on family-owned enterprise security is a great niche, and obviously, having your name attached as co-founder gives it a lot of weight. Your track record at Vantacrest is legendary." The room seemed to tilt. "Mr. Ross," I said, "do you have the URL for the website mentioned in that deck?" "Sure," he said, sounding slightly confused now. "It is campbellstrategicsecurity.com. Is everything all right?" "Ms. Campbell?" "Everything is fine," I lied. "I just want to verify which version of the bio they used. Thank you for the call." I hung up. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so cold it felt like liquid nitrogen. I typed the address into my browser. The page loaded instantly. It was sleek. It was professional. It used a color palette of navy blue and slate gray, suspiciously similar to Vantacrest's branding. The logo was a stylized shield with the letter C interlocking with an S, and there, right on the landing page, was my face. It was a headshot I had taken for a LinkedIn update 3 years ago. I looked confident, professional, trustworthy. Next to it, in bold sans serif font, was the text, "Meet our leadership, Zara Campbell, co-founder, chief strategy officer." With over a decade of experience securing Fortune 500 assets, Zara brings elite-level protection to your family business. I scrolled down. The text was a word salad of buzzwords and blatant lies. It claimed the firm had offices in Seattle and Savannah. It claimed they offered proprietary threat detection algorithms. And then I saw the team. Listed as co-founder CEO was Mark Campbell, my father. His bio described him as a business visionary with 40 years of management experience. Listed as Director of Client Relations was Brielle Halstead. Her photo was a heavily filtered selfie cropped to look professional. Her bio claimed she was a communications expert specializing in high net worth crisis management. I stared at the screen. I felt like I was hallucinating. It was absurd. It was comical. But it was also lethal. In the world of high-stakes cybersecurity, reputation is everything. Exclusivity is everything. My contract with Vanta Crest had a strict non-compete clause. I was not allowed to consult, advise, or even sneeze in the direction of another security firm. If my compliance officer saw this website, if they saw me listed as a co-founder of an outside entity, I would be fired before lunch. I would be sued for breach of contract. My security clearance would be revoked. They weren't just using my name. They were playing Russian roulette with my career, and they had pointed the gun at my head. I grabbed my phone. I didn't call my father's cell. I called the number listed on the Contact Us page of the website. It was an 1800 number. It rang 3 times. "Thank you for calling Campbell Strategic Security," a voice answered. It was my father. He was using a business voice, deeper, slower, trying to sound authoritative. "This is Mark speaking. How may I secure your future today?" "You can start by taking the website down, Dad," I said. There was a silence on the line. A profound, stumbling silence. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the television on in the background. Probably The Price is Right. "Zara?" he stammered. His business voice vanished, replaced by the nervous tone of a child caught with his hand in the jar. We weren't expecting you to call this line." "I bet you weren't," I said. "Take it down. Now. Now. Hold on a minute, honey," he said, shifting gears into defensive mode. "Don't fly off the handle. We are just testing the waters. It is a soft launch." "A soft launch?" I repeated. "You are using my name, my photo, and my credentials to sell a service you do not have. That is fraud, Dad. That is literal, actionable fraud." "It is not fraud," he protested. "It is family branding. You are a Campbell. We are Campbells. It is our name. We have a right to use our name." "You do not have a right to claim I am your chief strategy officer," I said. "Do you have any idea what this does to me? I could lose my job. Today." "Oh, stop being dramatic," he scoffed. "Vanta Crest is a giant corporation. They don't care about a little family startup. We are just trying to get some leads. Zara, just trying to put food on the table. Since you decided to cut us off, we had to get creative." "Creative?" I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You stole my identity." "We leveraged an asset," a new voice chimed in. It was Brielle. She must have been on speakerphone or listening on the extension. "And honestly, Zara, you should be flattered. We are building a legacy here. We are doing this for the family name." "Brielle," I said, my voice low. "You are pitching venture capital firms. I just got a call from the Meridian Group. Do you know what happens when they find out you are a stay-at-home mom and Dad is a retired middle manager, and neither of you knows how to encrypt a PDF, let alone a server?" "I am a fast learner," Brielle shouted. "And I have great people skills. That is what this business is about. Relationships. You handle the tech stuff in the background. We handle the clients. It is a perfect partnership." "I never agreed to a partnership," I yelled. It was the first time I had raised my voice in years. "I am not your partner. I am not your safety net. I am a victim of identity theft." "Don't you use that legal mumbo-jumbo with us," my father warned. "We are doing this to survive. The roof is leaking. Zara, the transmission is dead. We are drowning, and you are standing on the shore complaining about the color of the life raft." "This isn't a life raft," I said. "It is an anchor, and you tied it around my neck." "We needed credibility," Brielle said, her voice turning tearful again. "Nobody was calling us back. But when we put your name on the deck, everyone started answering. We have 3 meetings lined up next week. Zara, big meetings. If we close just one, we are set. We won't need to ask you for a penny ever again. Isn't that what you wanted?" I closed my eyes. They truly didn't get it. They were so blinded by their own immediate needs, the leaking roof, the status anxiety, that they couldn't see they were committing a felony. They thought my career was just a magic wand I was refusing to wave. "Who else have you contacted?" I asked. "I need a list, right now." "We are not giving you a list so you can sabotage us," my father said. "We are going to these meetings, and if you are a good daughter, you will back us up. If anyone calls you, just say yes. Just say we are working together. Is that so hard? It costs you $0 to say yes." "It costs me my integrity," I said. "It costs me my license." "Integrity doesn't pay the mortgage," Mark shouted. "Family pays the mortgage." I hung up. There was no point in talking. They were operating in a different reality. I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I needed to think. I needed to assess the blast radius. I turned back to my computer. I started digging. If they had a website, they had a domain host. They had email servers. I ran a search on the domain registration. It was registered to Mark Campbell, using his home address in Savannah. Amateur hour. Then I searched for the email addresses listed on the site. info@campbellstrategicsecurity.com. partners@campbellstrategicsecurity.com. I did something I technically shouldn't have done. But in the hierarchy of survival, it was necessary. I used a tool I had developed for open-source intelligence gathering to scan for public-facing data leaks associated with their domain. I found a cache of outgoing emails. They hadn't secured their mail server. It was wide open. I opened one of the emails. It was a proposal sent to a regional hospital network in Georgia, a massive chain with thousands of patient records. Subject: Proposal for Security Audit. Campbell Strategic Security. Dear Mr. Henderson, as the co-founder of Campbell Strategic, and drawing on my current experience as Director of Operations at Vantacrest Digital, I can personally guarantee that our team will identify vulnerabilities that others miss. The email was signed Zara Campbell, but it had been sent from Brielle's IP address. They weren't just using my bio. They were impersonating me. They were forging my digital signature. They were making promises in my name that, when broken, and they would be broken, would lead directly to lawsuits naming me as the primary defendant. If that hospital hired them, and if they were breached, which was inevitable, I would be liable. I would be destroyed. I read another email. This one was to a bank, another to a logistics firm. They were carpet bombing the industry with my reputation. I felt a strange sensation then. The fear evaporated, the panic vanished. In their place, a cold, hard resolve settled over me like a suit of armor. This wasn't family drama anymore. This wasn't a disagreement about money or affection. This was an act of war. They had crossed the line from parasites to predators. They had threatened the one thing I had built entirely on my own, my good name. I picked up my phone again. I didn't call my father. I didn't call Brielle. I called Elias Thorne, the attorney I had consulted months ago. "Elias," I said when he answered. "It is Zara Campbell." "Zara," he said. "Good to hear from you. Did you want to move forward with the trust structure?" "No," I said. "I have a new situation. I need you to file a cease and desist order immediately, and I need you to prepare a fraud affidavit." "Who is the target?" Elias asked, his voice sharpening. "Campbell Strategic Security," I said. "Operating out of Savannah, Georgia. Do you know the principals?" "Yes," I said. I looked at the photo of my father and sister on the website, the smiling faces of the people who had raised me, the people who claimed to love me. "They are my family," I said. "But do not treat them like family. Treat them like hostiles." "If we go down this road, Zara," Elias warned, "it gets ugly. Once we file, it is public record. It is a legal strike." "I know," I said. "They are impersonating me to solicit contracts. They are forging my signature. If I don't stop them, I go down with them." "Understood," Elias said. "I will have the papers drafted within the hour. Do you want to give them a warning?" I looked at the email where Brielle had signed my name to a lie. "No," I said. They didn't warn me when they stole my face. Let's play by the rules. The real ones. I hung up the phone. I turned back to my monitor. I took a screenshot of the website. I saved the emails. I compiled the evidence folder. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I felt a grim satisfaction. They wanted to play business? They wanted to be big shots in the corporate world? Fine. I would give them their first lesson in corporate governance. Liability. The conference room at Thorne Associates smelled of lemon polish, expensive leather, and billable hours. It was a sterile environment, stripped of all emotion, which was exactly what I needed. I sat across from Elias Thorne, a man who wore his suits like armor and treated the law like a scalpel. Next to him sat a forensic identity specialist named Marcus, a man who spoke in the hushed, reverent tones of someone who spent his life cleaning up other people's digital messes. We were not there to discuss family dynamics. We were there to execute a controlled demolition. "We have identified the hosting provider," Marcus said, sliding a dossier across the polished mahogany table. "It is a budget service, low security. We also found the registrant information for the domain. It is confirmed as Mark Campbell, residential address in Savannah." "And the content?" I asked. "It is a direct appropriation of your intellectual property," Elias answered. "They didn't just borrow your resume, Zara. They copied whole paragraphs from your LinkedIn profile, your Vantacrest speaker bio, and even an abstract from a white paper you published 3 years ago. Legally, this is copyright infringement, misappropriation of likeness, and deceptive trade practices." I looked at the printed screenshots of the website. Campbell Strategic Security. It looked so legitimate on paper. It looked like a company you would trust with your secrets. It made my stomach turn. "What is the play?" Elias asked. "We can go soft, a warning letter, or we can go hard." "Go hard," I said immediately. "I want a cease and desist order delivered by courier to their front door. Today, I want it to cite specific statutes. I want it to threaten immediate litigation for damages if the site is not down within 12 hours. And I want a demand for the destruction of all marketing materials bearing my name." Elias nodded, scratching a note on his legal pad. "And if they call you?" "They won't be able to reach me," I said. "I have blocked them on everything. All communication goes through you." "Good," Elias said. "Let's keep it that way." The cease and desist letter went out at 2:00 in the afternoon. The effect was almost instantaneous. It was faster than any response I had ever received when I was sending them money. When I was their ATM, they took days to reply. When I was their legal adversary, they moved at the speed of light. By 8:00 that evening, CampbellStrategicSecurity.com was gone. It had been replaced by a generic 404 not found error page. The LinkedIn page for the company vanished. The Twitter account, which had 12 followers, mostly my mother's bridge club friends, was deactivated. They had folded. They hadn't fought. They hadn't argued. They had simply unplugged the machine and run for cover. It confirmed what I already knew. They were cowards. They relied on my passivity. The moment I showed teeth, they retreated. But taking down the website was only the first step. The damage control had to happen on my side of the fence, and that was going to be the hardest conversation of my career. The next morning, I walked into the office of the Chief Compliance Officer at Vantacrest Digital. His name was Robert, a man with eyes like flint who could spot a lie from across the room. "Zara," he said, gesturing to the chair. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Everything okay with the ops team?" I sat down. I kept my back straight. I placed a folder on his desk. "Robert, I need to make a formal disclosure," I said. My voice was steady, trained by years of boardroom presentations, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. "It has come to my attention that a third-party entity has been using my name, likeness, and professional credentials to solicit business without my consent or knowledge." Robert's eyebrows shot up. He opened the folder. He saw the screenshots of the Campbell Strategic site. He saw the bios. He saw the emails I had intercepted. This is your family? He asked, looking at the photo of Mark and Brielle. Yes, I said. They are estranged. They created this entity in an attempt to leverage my position here. I want to be perfectly clear. I have no affiliation with this company. I have not received any compensation from them. I have initiated legal action to shut them down, and the website has already been removed. Robert studied the papers for a long time. The silence stretched out, taut and terrifying. If he thought for 1 second that I was moonlighting, that I was double-dipping, I would be walked out of the building by security within the hour. My stock options would be voided. My reputation would be incinerated. Finally, he looked up. You initiated the takedown? Yesterday, I said. Through Thorne Associates. He nodded slowly. You did the right thing coming to us. Zara, if we had found this on our own, the conversation would be very different. I know, I said. I will have to log this, he said. We will need to do an internal audit just to be safe, to make sure no Vantacrest data was exfiltrated to this entity. I welcome the audit, I said. I have nothing to hide. I know you don't, Robert said. He closed the folder. I am sorry you are going through this. It looks messy. It is controlled, I said. I left his office feeling like I had just defused a bomb with seconds on the clock. I had saved my job, but the humiliation lingered. I had to formally denounce my own father and sister to my employer. I had to label them as security threats, but the pain wasn't over. 2 days later, my office phone rang. It was an external number. Ms. Campbell, a woman's voice said. This is Sarah Jenkins from the purchasing department at Strickland Logistics. I am following up on a proposal we received from your firm regarding a vulnerability assessment. I closed my eyes. Strickland Logistics, a massive shipping company, a huge target. Ms. Jenkins, I said, my voice tight. Which firm are you referring to? Campbell Strategic Security, she said. The proposal was very compelling. We were particularly interested in the pricing. It is significantly lower than the other bids, but I just wanted to verify the timeline you proposed. I had to do it. I had to destroy the illusion, and in doing so, I had to admit that my name had been on a lie. Ms. Jenkins, I said, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I did not send that proposal. I am not affiliated with Campbell Strategic Security. That document was sent without my authorization. There was a confused silence on the other end. But it is signed by you. I have the PDF right here. It has your signature. My blood ran cold. Can you email that to me? Right now? I suppose so, she said, sounding alarmed. Is this a fraud issue? Please send the file, I said. A minute later, the email arrived. I opened the attachment. It was a 10-page proposal, amateurish in design but dangerous in content. And there, on the final page, was a signature, Zara Campbell. It wasn't a digital stamp. It wasn't a standard font. It was a scrawl that looked terrifyingly like my actual signature. It was a forgery, executed with a steady hand. I zoomed in. I knew my own hand. I knew the way I looped my Z. I knew the sharp angle of my C. This was close. It was practiced. Brielle. I remembered being a teenager, practicing signatures in notebooks. I remembered Brielle sitting across from me, copying my handwriting for fun, saying, I can do you better than you can. She hadn't just used my name. She had forged my legal mark on a contract worth $50,000. This was no longer a civil dispute. This was a felony. This was fraud in the first degree. I printed the document. I added it to the binder. I stared at the signature until the lines blurred. The second call came that afternoon, from the hospital administrator I had seen in the email logs. The conversation was the same, the confusion, the embarrassment, the admission that I was not who they thought I was. I apologize for the confusion, I told the administrator, feeling the acid taste of shame in my mouth. Please disregard any communication from that domain. It is a security risk. Each call was a knife cut. Each explanation chipped away at the professional armor I had spent a decade building. I wasn't the tech mogul anymore. I was the woman with the con artist family. I was the woman whose sister was trying to scam hospitals. I went back to the data. I needed more. If they were willing to forge a signature. What else had they done? I dug into the metadata of the files Sarah Jenkins had sent me. I looked at the document properties. Created by Brielle Halstead. Software, Adobe Acrobat Pro. Creation date, January 14th. I found the source of the logo design. It was a template stolen from a graphic design marketplace, watermarked in the draft versions I found on their server. I found drafts of emails where they discussed how to sound like Zara. Mark, use more big words. She always talks about vectors and mitigation. Brielle, I will just copy and paste from her old reports. Nobody reads that stuff anyway. I saved everything, every email, every timestamp, every humiliating thread where they reduced my career to a series of buzzwords they could mimic to steal money. I wasn't doing this to be petty. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing this to build a cage. I needed to make the walls of evidence so high and so thick that they could never climb out. I needed to ensure that if they ever tried to blame me, if they ever tried to say I was a silent partner, I could crush that lie with a mountain of digital forensics. Then, the letter arrived. It came to my condo, not my office. It was a white envelope, handwritten. I recognized the script immediately. It was my mother's handwriting, looping, decorative, frantic. There was no return address. I sat at my kitchen island and opened it with a letter opener. Inside was a single sheet of floral stationery and a photograph. I looked at the photo first. It was grainy, taken on film in the late 90s. It showed me at age 10, sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by the pieces of an old radio I had taken apart. My father was sitting in the chair behind me, watching TV, ignoring me, but in the photo, I looked focused. I looked happy. I unfolded the letter. My dearest Zara, I am writing this because I don't know how else to reach you. The lawyers say we can't call, but I am your mother, and no lawyer can stop a mother from loving her child. We took the website down. We did what you asked. We are so confused. Honey, we were only trying to build something for all of us. We thought you would be proud to see the family name on a business. We thought we were helping you expand your brand. Do you remember the day in this picture? You fixed that radio when nobody else could. We always knew you were special. We always knew you were destined for great things. We just wanted to ride along in your wake for a little while. Is that a crime? To want to be close to your success? Your father is crushed. Brielle hasn't stopped crying. We are family. Zara, we make mistakes, but we don't sue each other. We don't send police letters. Please, call off the lawyers. Come home. Let's sit down and have coffee and fix this. Just like you fixed that radio. Love. Mom. I read it twice. I looked for the words, I am sorry. They weren't there. I looked for the words, we were wrong. They weren't there. I looked for an admission of the forgery. Nothing. Instead, it was a weaponized memory. It was a distortion of history. We always knew you were special. No, they didn't. They thought I was weird. They yelled at me for taking the radio apart because they thought I broke it. They only remembered it fondly now because it fit the narrative of the genius daughter they were trying to sell. Is that a crime? She asked. Yes, it was. Literally. They were using the past to try to shackle me in the present. They were using a photo of a 10-year-old girl to manipulate a 34-year-old woman. I felt a surge of revulsion. It was the same feeling I had when I saw the fake website. It was the realization that nothing was sacred to them. Not my name, not my career, not even our childhood memories. Everything was just a resource to be mined. I didn't tear up the letter. I didn't burn it. I placed the letter and the photograph into a plastic evidence bag. I labeled it Exhibit D, Attempted Emotional Manipulation/Admission of Knowledge of Website. I put the bag in the binder. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The rain was lashing against the glass. Taking down the website wasn't enough. Scaring them with a lawyer wasn't enough. As long as they thought this was a private dispute, they would keep trying. They would find another angle. They would wait for the heat to die down, and then they would try to open a credit card in my name or sell consulting services under the table. They operated in the dark. They relied on the fact that I would be too embarrassed to expose them. They relied on the family secret staying secret. I realized then that I had to do the one thing they never expected. I had to turn on the lights, all of them. I wasn't just going to stop the fire. I was going to show the world who was holding the matches. I picked up my phone and dialed Elias. "It is me," I said. "Prepare the second phase. And Elias, I want you to contact the fraud departments of the 2 companies that reached out to me. I want to give a sworn statement." "Zara," Elias said, his voice cautious. "If you do that, it becomes a criminal investigation. Your sister could face jail time. Your father could lose his pension." "They forged my signature," I said. "They made their choice. Now I am making mine." "Understood," Elias said. I hung up. I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark window. I didn't look like the girl in the photo anymore. I looked like someone who had finally finished fixing the radio, only to realize that the station it was tuned to was nothing but static. And the only way to get a clear signal was to smash the device and buy a new one. I was ready to break the silence. I thought taking down the website would stop the bleeding. I thought the cease and desist order, delivered on heavy legal bond paper, would be enough to wake them up from their delusion. But I had forgotten the cardinal rule of parasites. When you cut off one food source, they do not starve gracefully, they simply migrate to a new host, or in my family's case, they try to reinvent the old one. The silence lasted for exactly 10 days. Then, the noise started again. But this time, it wasn't on a public domain. It was quieter, more insidious. It was the hum of a local whisper campaign. I was sitting in my office in Seattle, staring at a threat vector analysis for a shipping conglomerate, when my phone buzzed. It was Elias. "You need to see what I just sent to your secure email," he said. His voice was devoid of its usual lawyerly detachment. He sounded annoyed. I opened the file. It was a digital scan of a flyer. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, the kind used for weddings or high-end charity galas. The Savannah Women in Business Alliance invites you to an exclusive brunch. Keynote speaker, Brielle Halstead. Topic: The Power of Legacy. Building a global security brand from the kitchen table. Special guest of honor, in absentia, Zara Campbell. Co-founder. My blood temperature dropped 10 degrees. They hadn't stopped. They had just taken the con offline. They were doing it in person, in ballrooms and garden parties, where there were no Google crawlers to alert me. "Where did you get this?" I asked Elias. "One of the fraud investigators for the bank we contacted," Elias said. "His wife is on the board of this alliance. She saw the flyer and recognized the name from the alert list we circulated. Zara. They are charging $200 a plate." $200? I repeated. "And there is more," Elias continued. "We ran a credit sweep this morning. There was an inquiry yesterday from a commercial leasing agent in downtown Savannah. Someone is trying to lease office space in your name. They listed you as the personal guarantor." I closed my eyes. They weren't just pretending anymore. They were trying to build a brick-and-mortar reality on a foundation of forgery. And the worst part was, I knew exactly who was driving this. It wasn't my father. Mark was a follower. He was happy to play the CEO. But he didn't have the stomach for this kind of granular, high-stakes deception. This was Brielle. My sister, the one who cried about school fees, had tasted the power of my reputation, and she was addicted. She had realized that Zara Campbell's sister was a title that opened doors, but Zara Campbell's business partner was a title that opened vaults. "She is looking for investors," I said, realizing the endgame. "She is using this brunch to find a silent partner. She is going to take their money, promise them my technology, and then vanish when the house of cards collapses. If she signs a lease or takes investment money in your name," Elias said, "and then defaults which she will. You will be tied up in litigation for a decade. We need to file the criminal complaint. Zara. Now. No, I said. Not from here. Not a piece of paper. What are you going to do? I am going to the brunch, I said. I flew into Savannah on a red-eye flight. I didn't rent a car under my own name. I used a corporate account. I didn't stay at the historic hotel. I stayed at a generic motel by the airport, one with flickering neon lights and thin towels. I didn't want to be comfortable. I wanted to be invisible. The brunch was held at the Azalea Club, a place that smelled of old money and desperation. The parking lot was full of Mercedes and BMWs. Ladies in pastel dresses and wide-brimmed hats were filing in, clutching designer handbags. I sat in my rental car across the street, watching them. I was wearing a black suit, severe and sharp. I looked like an undertaker coming to collect a body. I pulled up social media on my burner phone. My mother, Dana, had posted a photo 10 minutes ago. It was a selfie of her and Brielle. Brielle was wearing a white power suit, strikingly similar to one I had worn in a Forbes profile picture 2 years ago. The caption read, "So proud of my baby girl. Building the family empire. It takes a village, and strong women lead the way. Campbell Legacy, Boss Babe Security Queens. Security Queens." The nausea was immediate and violent. My mother, who couldn't set the clock on her microwave, was hashtagging herself as a security queen. I looked at the passenger seat. There was a manila envelope there. Inside were the legal documents Elias had drafted. A formal cease and desist was just the appetizer. The main course was a notification of a civil lawsuit for fraud, identity theft, and emotional distress, along with a restraining order preventing them from using my name for any commercial purpose. But I wasn't going to hand it to them. I had hired a professional for that. A gray sedan pulled up next to me. A man got out. He was nondescript. Wearing a cheap suit and holding a clipboard, he looked like every other bureaucrat on earth. "Ms. Campbell?" he asked through my open window. "Yes," I said. "You have the papers?" "I do," he said, tapping the clipboard. "You want this done during the speech?" "During the speech," I confirmed. Loudly. He nodded and walked toward the club entrance. I gave him a 2-minute head start. Then I opened my car door. I walked into the Azalea Club like I owned the mortgage. The hostess tried to stop me. I wasn't on the list, and I definitely didn't fit the pastel dress code, but I just flashed my Vantacrest ID and kept walking. "I am the guest of honor," I said over my shoulder. "In absentia." The ballroom was packed. There were at least 100 women there. Round tables were draped in white linen. Waiters were pouring mimosas. At the front of the room, on a raised stage, stood Brielle. She looked radiant. She looked successful. She was holding a microphone, and her voice was projecting confidence I had never seen her possess. "You know," Brielle was saying, pacing the stage, "when my sister and I founded Campbell Strategic, we faced a lot of doubt. People said 2 women couldn't disrupt the cybersecurity industry. They said it was a boys' club. But Zara and I, we have this connection. We share a brain. I handle the vision. She handles the code. It is a perfect symbiosis." My mother was sitting in the front row, nodding vigorously, beaming at the crowd as if to say, "Yes, I made that. And that is why we are opening this investment round," Brielle continued. "Because we want to bring you all along on this journey. We want local women to own a piece of the future. We have a goal of raising $500,000 today to expand our operations center right here in Savannah." $500,000. She wasn't just lying. She was committing grand larceny in real time. She was soliciting $500,000 based on a phantom. I stepped into the back of the room. I folded my arms. The process server was already moving. He walked down the center aisle. He didn't run, but he moved with purpose. The clacking of his shoes on the parquet floor cut through the hush of the room. Brielle saw him coming. She faltered. She squinted against the stage lights. "Excuse me? Sir? This is a private event." The server didn't stop. He walked right up to the stage. He reached up and placed a thick stack of stapled papers onto the podium. right next to Brielle's water glass. "Brielle Halstead?" he announced. His voice was a booming baritone, trained for exactly this moment. "You are served." The silence that descended on the room was absolute. It was heavier than the silence at Aunt Estelle's birthday. That had been awkward. This was fatal. "What is this?" Brielle stammered. Looking at the papers, she laughed nervously into the microphone. Is this part of the entertainment?" "It is a lawsuit," the server said, loud enough for the back row to hear. "For fraud, identity theft, and solicitation of funds under false pretenses, filed by Zara Campbell." A gasp rippled through the room. 100 heads turned. Brielle went pale. She looked like a ghost. She looked at the papers. Then she looked up, scanning the room, her eyes wide with panic. "No," she whispered. "No, she wouldn't." Then she saw me. I was standing by the double doors, a dark silhouette against the light of the lobby. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just stood there, watching her. Our eyes locked. For a second, I saw the little sister I used to braid hair with. I saw the fear. But then I saw the rage. It twisted her face into something ugly. "Zara!" she screamed into the microphone. The feedback squealed, a high-pitched shriek that made everyone cover their ears. "Zara, how could you?" My mother stood up, knocking her chair over. She turned and saw me. "Zara, what are you doing?" I didn't answer. I turned around and walked out. I didn't run. I walked. I walked through the lobby, past the stunned hostess, out into the humid air. I got into my rental car. I locked the doors. I waited. It took exactly 3 minutes. My phone started to vibrate. It danced across the passenger seat. Mom calling, Mark calling, Brielle calling. I let it ring. I watched the screen light up and go dark. Over and over again, I watched the names of my family flash like warning lights on a dashboard. Finally, a text came through from Brielle. "You killed me. You literally just killed me. Everyone is leaving. The investors are asking for their checks back. How could you do this to me?" In front of everyone? I picked up the phone. I typed a reply. My fingers were steady. "You put on the suit. Brielle, you stood on the stage. You told the lie. I just turned on the lights." Another text. This time from my mother. "Zara, please, come to the house. Your father is having chest pains. We can fix this. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them it is a legal mix-up. We are family. Chest pains. The classic Mark Campbell defense. Whenever reality got too hard, his heart supposedly gave out." I didn't reply to her. I blocked the number for the next hour. I needed silence. I started the car and drove. I didn't go to the airport. I had one more stop to make. I drove to the outskirts of town, to a small bungalow nestled in a grove of live oaks. The paint was peeling slightly, but the garden was immaculate. It was Aunt Estelle's house. I parked in the driveway. Estelle was sitting on the porch swing, smoking a cigarette, just as she had been the night I left the Christmas party. It was as if she had been waiting for me for 6 months. I walked up the steps. "You did it," she said. It wasn't a question. "I did it," I said. I sat down on the swing next to her. I felt exhausted, a bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with jet lag. I blew it all up. Estelle, the brunch, the company, the reputation. It is all gone. "Good," she said. She exhaled a plume of smoke. "It was poison anyway. They hate me," I said. Brielle looked at me like I had murdered her children. "She hates you because you took away her mirror," Estelle said. "She was looking at herself through your success. Now she has to look at herself in the dark." Estelle reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a folded envelope. She handed it to me. "What is this?" I asked. "Something I should have given you a long time ago," she said, "but I wanted to wait until you were strong enough to understand it." I opened the envelope. It was a copy of a legal document, a last will and testament. I scanned the pages. It was dated 5 years ago. I, Estelle Campbell, being of sound mind. I skipped to the distribution of assets, to To my brother Mark and his wife Dana. I leave the contents of my attic, specifically the photo albums, so they may remember who they used to be before they became who they are. To my niece Brielle, I leave nothing, not out of malice, but out of necessity. Giving her money is like giving whiskey to an alcoholic. It only feeds the disease. To my niece Zara, I leave the entirety of my estate, including the house, the savings, and the trust fund established by our late father. However, this bequest is conditional. I looked up at Estelle. Conditional? Read the condition, she said, pointing a yellow-stained finger at the paragraph. The condition is that Zara Campbell must not, under any circumstances, use these funds to bail out, support, or save Mark, Dana, or Brielle Campbell. If she does, the entire estate will be donated to the local cat shelter. I stared at the words. 5 years ago, before the promotion, before the money, before the requests for water heaters and roof repairs. You knew, I whispered. You knew they would do this. I watched them, Estelle said. I watched how they treated you when you were 10. I watched how they treated you when you were 20. You were never a person to them. Zara, you were a resource. You were oil in the ground. And I knew the moment you struck gold, they would come with the drills. She looked at me, her eyes fierce and clear. I changed the will because I didn't want my money to be the weapon they used to hurt you. I wanted to make sure that when the time came, you were the one holding the keys, but I also knew you wouldn't be ready to lock the door until you saw the thief with your own eyes. I saw her today, I said. I saw the thief. And I locked the door. I said. Estelle smiled. It was a genuine smile, crinkling the corners of her eyes. Then my work is done. Do you want some iced tea? I made it fresh. I would love some, I said. We sat on the porch and drank tea while my phone buzzed in my pocket. A frantic, dying heartbeat of a family that had finally flatlined. I didn't check it. I didn't care. I listened to the wind in the oaks. I listened to the cicadas, and for the first time in my life, I didn't hear the background noise. I heard the music of my own life, playing clearly, without static. But as I sat there, I knew it wasn't completely over. The lawsuit would play out. The guilt trips would turn into legal battles. Brielle wouldn't just go quietly into the night. She had been humiliated publicly, and a narcissist with a wound is the most dangerous animal in the jungle. I took a sip of tea. Let them come. I wasn't the girl who fixed the printer anymore. I was the girl who owned the system, and I had just changed the password. The mediation room was located on the 14th floor of a glass tower in downtown Savannah. It was a soulless space, defined by a long oval table made of blonde wood and a view of the river that looked deceptively calm. The air conditioner hummed with a low, aggressive drone, scrubbing the air of any humidity, leaving it dry and sterile. On one side of the table sat my family. My father, Mark, was wearing a suit that was 10 years out of date, pulling tight across his shoulders. My mother, Dana, was dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue she had been holding for 20 minutes. Brielle sat between them, staring at the polished surface of the table as if it were a portal to a world where she was still the victim. Their lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he handled mostly traffic tickets and divorces, was shuffling papers nervously. On the other side sat Elias Thorne and me. We had no papers to shuffle. We had binders. We had evidence. We had the calm, terrifying certainty of the law on our side. We are here to reach a settlement regarding the civil complaint filed by Ms. Campbell against Campbell, Strategic Security and its principles, the mediator said. He was a retired judge with a face like a dried apple and zero patience for theatrics. Let us begin with the defense. Dana let out a sob. It was a practice sound, a sharp intake of breath followed by a trembling exhale. I just don't understand why we are here, she wailed. Looking at the mediator, this is a family matter. We are flesh and blood. You don't sue your own daughter. You just don't. We are here because your clients committed fraud, Elias said. His voice was bored. They forged my client's signature on service contracts. They misappropriated her likeness. They solicited funds under false pretenses. It was a misunderstanding, Mark blurted out. He was sweating, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. We were under a lot of pressure. The market is tough. We honestly thought Zara was on board. We thought she was just playing hard to get because of the argument at Christmas. We were holding her spot for her. That is all. Holding my spot, I repeated. I didn't look at him. I looked at the wall. By forging my name on a $50,000 contract with a hospital? I was going to tell you, Brielle snapped. Her head snapped up, her eyes blazing with that familiar mix of entitlement and rage. I was going to surprise you. When the check cleared, I was going to send you your share. I was doing all the legwork. Zara. I was the one meeting people. I was the one selling. You just had to sit there and be the face. And now you have destroyed me. She slammed her hand on the table. Do you know what people are saying? I can't show my face at the club. The investors are calling me a thief. You have ruined my future. Zara, you have burned everything I built. You didn't build anything. Brielle, I said. My voice was quiet. But in that acoustic vacuum, it landed like a hammer. You stole a blueprint and tried to build a house with cardboard. It collapsed because it was empty. It wasn't me who ruined your reputation. It was the truth. You are cold, my mother hissed. The tears stopped instantly. You have always been cold. We tried to include you. We tried to make you part of something bigger, and this is how you repay us? By dragging us into court? You didn't want to include me, I said. You wanted to harvest me. I turned to Elias. He nodded. Mr. Mediator, Elias said, we would like to introduce a piece of supplementary evidence. It is a sworn affidavit provided by Ms. Estelle Campbell, dated 3 days ago, along with a digital audio file she recorded on her porch during a conversation with the defendants last month. The color drained from Mark's face. He knew exactly which conversation that was. He had gone to Estelle's house to complain about me, to try and get her to lend him money to cover the legal fees. Elias placed a small speaker on the table and pressed play. The audio was crisp. The chirping of crickets was audible in the background. Mark's voice. The girl is out of control, Estelle. She thinks she is special because she writes code. But we have her cornered. She will cave. She always caves. She needs us to like her too much. Brielle's voice. Exactly. Once we get the first round of funding, we don't even need her anymore. We just keep her name on the website and hire some cheap college kid to do the actual work. Zara is just the hook. Once the fish is in the boat, who cares about the worm? Estelle's voice. And if she finds out? Brielle's voice. She won't. She is too busy trying to buy Mom's love. It is pathetic. Really, we just have to keep clapping for her, and she will sign anything. Elias stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a physical weight. I looked at my mother. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the speaker with her mouth slightly open, as if she had been slapped. She looked at Brielle. Brielle was looking at her lap. Her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. The worm, I said. That is what I was to you, bait. That was taken out of context. Mr. Henderson tried to say, but his voice was weak. He knew he had lost. He knew there was no coming back from that recording. It proved intent. It proved malice. It proved that everything they had said about family legacy was a lie constructed to exploit my psychological vulnerability. The settlement offer is on the table, Elias said, sliding a document across the wood. And it is non-negotiable. The terms? The mediator asked. Immediate dissolution of Campbell's strategic security. Elias recited. A permanent injunction against any of the defendants using the name Zara Campbell for any commercial purpose. A public retraction and apology to the 3 companies they defrauded, admitting that Zara Campbell had no knowledge of the proposals, and full restitution of the $5,000 deposit they took from the leasing agent. We don't have $5,000, Mark whispered. We spent it on the marketing materials. Then sell the boat, I said. My father looked at me. His eyes were red. He looked old. Zara, the boat is all I have. No, I said. You have your freedom. Because if you don't sign this, I file the criminal referral, and then the boat won't matter because you won't be able to use it where you're going. He flinched. He looked at Dana. Dana looked at Brielle. They were a triangle of defeat. One by one, they picked up the pen. Mark signed first, his hand shaking. Dana signed next, refusing to look at me. Brielle signed last. She pressed the pen into the paper so hard it tore the page. There is one more thing, Elias said. Regarding the estate of Estelle Campbell, my mother's head snapped up. What about it? Estelle is still alive. She is, Elias said. But she has finalized her estate planning, and she asked me to communicate the structure to you today so there are no misunderstandings later. Elias opened a second folder. Ms. Estelle Campbell has placed all her assets, including her home and her investment portfolio, into a blind trust, Elias explained. The beneficiary of the trust is the Campbell Family Care Fund. However, the sole trustee, with absolute discretion over all disbursements, is Zara Campbell. The room went deadly still. What does that mean? Dana asked, her voice trembling. It means, I said, leaning forward, that when the time comes, I control the money, all of it. If you need money for a medical emergency, you apply to me. I will review the invoice. I will pay the doctor directly. You will never touch a cent of cash. If you need money for a roof repair, I will hire the contractor. I will inspect the work. I looked at Brielle. And there is a clause. No funds from the trust may be used for any business venture, investment scheme, or legal defense for any family member. If you try to start another company, you do it with your own money. Dana slumped in her chair. The realization hit her like a physical blow. For 40 years, she had controlled the family narrative. She had decided who was the hero and who was the scapegoat. She had spun the stories to suit her needs. Now, the story was over. The pen had been taken out of her hand. You can't do that, she whispered. It is cruel. It is security, I said. It is what I do. I stood up. I felt no joy. I felt no rush of adrenaline. I just felt a quiet, clinical sense of completion. It was the feeling of closing a ticket after a long, complicated system patch. The bug was isolated. The vulnerability was patched. The system was safe. We are done here, I said. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking on the marble floor of the hallway. Dana called my name once, a weak, desperate sound. Zara. I didn't stop. I pressed the button for the elevator. The doors slid open. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, I saw them through the narrowing gap. They were sitting there, frozen in the amber light of the conference room, trapped in the wreckage of their own making. I flew back to Seattle that night. The rain was falling when I landed, a familiar, comforting drizzle that washed away the humidity of the South. I took a cab to my condo. I unlocked the door. The apartment was dark and quiet. I walked to the window and looked out at Elliott Bay. The ferries were moving across the water, glowing beetles in the night. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't turn on the TV. I just stood there and breathed. 6 months later, I sat at the head of a long table in a community center in downtown Seattle. Around me sat 12 young women. They were diverse, eager, and terrifyingly smart. They were the first cohort of the Campbell Initiative, a mentorship program I had funded to help women break into the field of cybersecurity. The most important thing to remember, I told them, is that your value is not defined by how useful you are to others. It is defined by your competence, your integrity, and your boundaries. A young girl named Maya raised her hand. But what if people say you are being difficult? What if they say you are not a team player? I smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached my eyes. Then you are probably doing something right, I said. Being a background character is safe. Maya. But you can't change the code if you are just part of the interface. You have to be willing to be the admin, and sometimes, being the admin means locking people out. They laughed. They took notes. They looked at me not with the hungry eyes of predators, but with the bright eyes of students. I checked my phone after the session. There were no texts from Georgia. My mother had stopped trying to rewrite history. Brielle was working as a receptionist at a dental office, a job I had verified through the Trust's investigative resources. Mark had sold the boat to pay the legal fees. They were living their lives. I was living mine. The cord was cut. I walked out into the cool Seattle air. I pulled my coat tighter around me. I used to think that revenge was a loud thing. I thought it was screaming matches and public shaming. I thought it was making them hurt the way they hurt me. But as I walked down the street, disappearing into the crowd of strangers, I realized the truth. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying them. It was simply removing myself from their equation. I had been the load-bearing wall in their house of cards. All I had to do was step away. And gravity did the rest. The day they stopped treating me like background noise was the day I stopped letting them switch my life on and off. And in the silence that followed, I finally heard the sound of my own freedom. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy subway in New York, a quiet room in London, or maybe somewhere in between? Please leave a comment below to share your location and your thoughts on Zara's decision. Don't forget to subscribe to the Jane Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story. Stay strong, and see you in the next one.